Hi, all. This is your Professor Ian. I'm just giving you an update on the pop culture mythology project that we are working on, that we are presenting next week. So I just now went through all the groups. I consolidated a couple, but mostly I just sent out some emails to kind of light some fires to get people involved in their groups. A lot of the groups are on track. They have a figure chosen. People are communicating, dividing the work. We still have lots of time with this, but because it's not a huge presentation, I will say. You don't have to knock yourself out and do 30 hours of work on this, but you do need to put some work in and think about it. The idea is to think about how Greek mythology is still a part of contemporary culture, and how that changes from the original myth. A lot of people were um, surprised by the representation of Zeus in Theogony and the other Hesiod stuff. And some of the other stuff we've read too. They were surprised that Zeus is such a complicated figure. Let's put it that way. And he's a very complicated figure. People were surprised by that because the representation that we have of Zeus these days in Disney movies and such, he's like a benevolent king, right? He's a good guy. He's a good ruler, all that kind of stuff. He doesn't cheat on Hera. He doesn't sexually assault women, humans. He doesn't do any of the terrible things that he does, right? He doesn't kill people out of spite, right? All that stuff that actually happens in Greek myth has been kind of Disneyfied out of our representations of Zeus. Anyways, what I was going to say, yeah, so that's what this project we're thinking about, how these myths are still part of our culture and how they've changed. So, anyways, I've gone through the groups, I've lit some fires, got everybody hopefully on track. Everybody, please do check your groups. I've left messages in every group just to give you guys some directions, some ideas. And also, I'm posting this slideshow to Canvas in the pop culture mythology module. This is a PowerPoint slideshow that a group used last year, or last in the fall, I guess it was, the fall semester when I taught this as a face-to-face course. I taught mythology in the fall face-to-face. They did the same project with groups, choosing a figure, contemporary representations, but because it was a face-to-face class, they did an in-person presentation using PowerPoint. So here's going to be a bit different because you're using Wakelet, but I'm going to go through this just to show you the kinds of things they did. So they chose Achilles as their figure. They started with some background about him. They didn't give every detail. Remember, this was an oral presentation, so they just gave the bullet points and then they talked in person. For your Wakelet project, you're going to have to write it up a bit more, but this is the kind of thing, right? A bit of background, an ancient statue to give an idea of how the ancients represented them. That's a good idea to think about, right? They also gave a couple more classical representations of Achilles, which was useful as well, because the way that Achilles has been represented over the years has changed, right? So here's some, classic European representations of Achilles in early modern European art. So they went through that. I remember they're talking this whole time. This is the group. They compared him to BALDR, the Norse god, which was an interesting comparison. There's actually a lot of similarities between BALDR and Achilles. And remember, this is an oral presentation, so the person who was presenting gave us more details and talked about this. So you would fill out those details for your Wakelet project, but that was one representation they found interesting. That was stretching it a little bit, but I don't mind if you guys want to stretch a little bit. They did a more comparative kind of thing. And here is where they got into more of the pop culture side of things. They looked at representation of Achilles in the Percy Jackson series, right? The Rick Riordan books and movies. So they looked at how he's represented in that. Again, bullet points, you're going to write that out a bit more with your Wakelet project. Graphics are fantastic. More graphics, the better, right? Some more details from that. The Last Olympian, right? Looking at the differences. And they're pointing out the similarities and differences as they go. And then they chose Troy from 2004 as another representation of Achilles, right? Very different than let me go back to the Percy Jackson version, right? Right. Oh boy, forgot they had that. Yeah. So very different than the Percy Jackson version, right? That's like a YA novel. Troy was his like, kind of war picture with Brad Pitt as the stunningly handsome version of Achilles. So very different representations, right? It's more graphics. They talked about some of these differences. And these are all differences from the original myth, right? Because this doesn't happen in the original myth. This doesn't happen. None of this happens in the original myth, right? Well, some of it does, but a lot of it's all different than how it happens in the original myth. And this is what they were talking about in front of the class. So they went through some of the scenes from that movie. Talked about yeah, it's the end. So then they talked about the death of Achilles in the movie Troy, right? Because when we get to the Iliad, we're going to discover that we don't actually see the death of Achilles. Spoiler alert. But then they talked about that. So similarities and differences between the movie and the classical representations of Achilles. And then remember, this was an oral presentation, so they did their conclusion. They didn't have any slides for that. They discussed the similarities and the differences between modern representations of Achilles and classic representations of Achilles. Right? In the Iliad, Achilles is kind of a jerk. He really holds certain values of the Greeks above other values, and he really sticks to those values. And so he's kind of a jerk, but he's also kind of a hero. And he's a tragic hero in a way that, in the sense that he is so committed to certain values that he can't ever bend his what he's going to do, even though it costs him his life and it's disastrous at times for the Greek army. So he's this tragic hero figure from Greek myth, and the way he's been changed in contemporary representations is what they explore in the project. And that's what you want to do. You want to choose one figure, you want to choose 3 representations and try to find a pattern or even multiple ways that this figure is represented that is different or the same from the classical Greek sources. Most figures are different than their classical representation, so most of your project will concentrate on like, okay, so Zeus is a philandering jerk who gets revenge on people for little reason in Greek mythology. So why has he been changed to this benevolent king figure in, say, Disney's Hercules or something like that, right? So that's the kind of thing you want to think about in your conclusion. Okay. Also, so this group used, they did something a little bit different. They compared Achilles to a Norse figure. They used a series of books, and then they used a movie. So you can use anything you want. If you can find, I don't know, music with representations of the god, like a song about Aphrodite or something, I'm not sure. Or I know there's a group, at least one group that's working on Medusa. They could use the Versace logo because Versace has this kind of image of Medusa as one of their logos. So, the sky's the limit as far as you want to go with the representations. Just remember, you need to think about it and really dig into it. You just can't show me a logo and say, oh, there you go. That's all we're going to do with that. You got to think about why they're using, say, for example, why is Versace using Medusa? Are they using Medusa as she's known in like the Ovid story, or as in Hesiod, or is it some other take on Medusa? Do they have some other reinvention of this figure, and why are they doing that? Okay, so that's just some ideas about the presentation. Hopefully everybody is doing some research on that. I'll say it once again, if you don't want to work on this project over the July 4th weekend, do your work early, do it this weekend, get it done, and then you won't have to worry about it. Okay, that's about it for now. Please do email me if you have any other questions or concerns.